Thank you, Mr President. I move this notice of motion number 74 standing in my name. I present this motion today because I have a sincere interest in improving public transport services across Victoria, particularly in Melbourne. As you know, my background is in the taxi and hire car industry, and I say this industry is an integral part of our public transport system. Our trams, trains and buses deliver services across the city and out to our regional areas, but as part of the system, our commercial passenger vehicles deliver on the first and last mile, and in particular for the most vulnerable. Those who are sick, those who are frail, those who are young and at risk, the elderly and those travelling late at night. I ask for this investigation to extend our free tram zone and offer free public transport to our students and our senior citizens, because I believe it is a step towards changing the way people choose to get around this great city of ours. I ask this, it's time we break the culture of using cars to get everywhere in Melbourne, especially when accessing services and events in the centre of the city. So making transport to our universities, hospitals, major attractions and sporting precincts free at all times make this network the obvious and best option for all who move around Melbourne. The debate isn't whether we should have more roads or public transport. We clearly need both. But much of our current planning focuses heavily on cars, and we need to make a cultural shift. We need to help Melbourne people embrace public transport. We need to find ways to make sure public transport is the best option, the first option when we travel to the city. Bringing your car into the CBD will not be the best option if our tram work is free. The Australian Automobile Association 2018 Road Congestion in Australia report found that Melbourne had the sharpest decline of all Australian cities in the average free flow speeds from congestion over the period between 2014 and 2018 at 8%. Depending on the metric used, either percentage of free-flowing traffic or the percentage of speed limit met, the AAA found Melbourne is either the most congested or the second most congested city in Australia. Congestion in Melbourne, in our city, is a growing problem, and as the population of Melbourne increases over the next 30 years, as we strive to drive tourism, so too the demand for our public transport network will grow. Congestion problem will grow with it. Melbourne City is no longer just the grid and merely a place for 9 to 5. The city is a tourist destination, it is a thriving shopping precinct and a vibrant social hub of activity and events. It includes major health, education, sporting precincts, and it's also the home of a growing number of residents, people who choose to live right in the heart. Last year, 2018, total tourist spending in Melbourne was over $18 billion, up almost 11% from the previous year. There are over 31 million total visitors, almost 19 million domestic day trippers, 10 million domestic visitors staying overnight, and some 3 million international visitors staying overnight. This is an increase of 7% on the previous year. The fastest growing category of visitor was the domestic overnight category, which saw an increase of nearly 8% from the previous year. People from our regions and interstate are coming to Melbourne. Let's make it easy for them to leave their cars behind. Extending the free tram zone encourages participation and access for tourists and locals alike and removes the need for them to consider bringing vehicles into the city. It also takes much of the confusion out of the process of getting around the city. While Mikey is a staple for Melbourne residents, it's a challenge for visitors to the city, especially foreign visitors, and the cost of a card has an extra cost of a day's fare. Many of our key destinations for visitors to the city lie just outside the current free tram zone. Visitors have to get off the tram a stop early or walk or buy a Mikey card to travel a single stop. The Committee for Melbourne proposal to extend the free tram zone says that including key visitor experiences in the free tram zone would do a great deal to increase visitor spending to reach the city's vision for tourist spending to reach $37 billion by 2025. The proposal quotes the National Gallery of Victoria, which estimates that the inclusion of the zone would lead to a 3% increase in visitor numbers, amounting to an additional 75,000 visitors a year. The proposed free tram zone extension of the network will include our inner city hospitals. This supports our needy, vulnerable, sick and infirm, their families and those who support them in medical treatments and hospital stays. It provides better access for the thousands of staff, volunteers, students and visitors to the hospitals and the education precincts. Overcrowding and inflated parking costs at our city hospitals are a burden for visitors and staff. Giving free transport access to the hospitals in the inner city takes away some of this pressure. The expansion of the free tram zone in the areas outlined in this motion will take in 7 major hospitals, otherwise currently excluded. By my count, the hospital staff total approaches 30,000, plus another several thousand volunteers. The number of patient and visitors would be enormous. The hospitals include the Royal Children's Hospital, which has some 4,000 staff and 600 volunteers. The Royal Women's Hospital, which employs 1,500 staff, 100 volunteers. The Peter Mac Cancer Centre, 2,500 staff, 200 volunteers. Royal Melbourne Hospital, 9,000 staff, 480 volunteers. And the free tram extension includes the Alfred with over 9,000 staff and 500 volunteers. And the Dental Hospital with its 400 staff plus Melbourne Hospital. This motion offers the staff and volunteers an incentive to use public transport, a free alternative to driving to work. The free tram zone will include Australia's premium higher education institution, the University of Melbourne, an institution employing 9,000 staff and serving over 52,000 students, full-time equivalents. It will provide better access to the RMIT University on the fringe of the current free tram zone. It will include some of the fantastic research institutes highly regarded as an international scale, such as the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute, the Bio21 Molecular Science and Biotechnology Institute, the Murdoch Children's Research Centre, Howard Florey, Alfred Medical Research and Education Precinct, and there'll be free trams to the city campuses of Monash University, the Baker IDI Heart and Diabetes Institute, and the Burnett Institute. Many of these health and academic organisations work together. An extended free tram zone will encourage and strengthen these programs and allow for better engagement among our leading health and academic professionals. These organisations are the centres of major partnerships between industry and academia. These important connections should be recognised and fostered by linking the central business and academic districts with free travel. In recent years, we've seen free tram zone extended to include sporting venues during major events such as the AFL Grand Final at the MCG, with additional trams and trains put onto service the extra travellers in this area. This has been a great success. It is also a necessary measure. The logistics of trying to police fair evasion of these services at these times would be impossible. The free tram extension proposed would include sporting grounds such as MCG, home of the Collingwood Football Club, the Olympic Park to the east and Princes Park, Royal Park to the north and west of the city. Landmarks such as the Zoo, the Shrine of Remembrance, the Sydney Mire Music Bowl, Government House, Royal Botanic Gardens, Alexandra Gardens, Fitzroy Gardens will be better accessed, along with the Arts Centre Precinct and the National Gallery of Victoria. We want to encourage visitors to these areas. We want to encourage locals into these areas. It makes sense to encourage tram travel to these many major destinations and encourage everyone to enjoy what Melbourne has to offer. Will it cost? Yes. But this is something Melbourne can afford. I have received some preliminary figures from the Parliamentary Budget Office to estimate costs extending the free tram network to cover the additional 6.1 kilometres. This free tram zone extension would reflect 13 tram routes and could cost somewhere between $4 to $5 million extra per year. However, keep in mind that this figure accounts for free tram trips. It doesn't account for the free tram users who have already paid to travel into the city. If $4 to $5 million is the cost of battling congestion in the city, it's not a lot to ask. I spoke earlier about the investment we have had in society in driving our cars. We love them, but we need to change that car culture and think longer term about the effects of driving our cars everywhere we go. Training our students to look at public transport as the first and best option to move about the city is a great way to effect change in that culture. By offering free public transport to all full-time students starting at our schools, universities and TAFEs, we can build a new mindset about public transport use from a young age and set good habits in place. Likewise, our seniors, who face increasingly high costs of living, should be rewarded for a life of contribution to our communities. Free transport for them would encourage their ongoing and active participation in their communities and in the wider Melbourne community that may otherwise not happen due to financial constraints and distance. Anything that supports full-time students, their parents and our seniors is a good thing. Anything that reduces the reliance on cars through incentives to use free travel options is a no-brainer. Of course, we won't compensate for poor services, but a state-of-the-art tram network should not be beyond our reach just because we make it cheaper for some groups. We want public transport to be the best option, and so it must be the most efficient, most reliable and the safest system possible. I want this inquiry to investigate new technologies to enable intelligent transport systems that can improve the performance of our network. This might include high-capacity signalling systems, such as being trialled as part of the Metro Tunnel project. This allows trains to safely run closer together, meaning we can offer more frequent services. Or it might include active public transport prioritisation to give priority to trams and buses to make trips faster. Yarra Trams right now are testing a new signalling system in 25 trams on Route 75, which runs along Toorak Road and the Burwood Highway. This system uses GPS technology to track position of the trams and takes into account live road conditions to determine traffic light sequences. The trams get through congestion, problems are improved. Any technology options that make trains, trams and buses the best option need to be considered. Dynamic pricing. Finally, my motion asks the committee to investigate dynamic pricing and options that would encourage more efficient use of the public transport networks. We have some of this already in place. How many of you are aware that Metropolitan Journey is free if you touch on and off before 7:15 a.m. on a weekday, as long as your Mikey's got some money on it? Other than this early bird special, prices don't reflect demand for services. Travelling in crowded trains at peak hours costs the same as waiting until the crush ends and travelling later in the morning. I want to end today by speaking briefly on some of the international experiences on free public transport. In Estonia, public transport is almost free. This small country in Northern Europe is one of the world's most digitally advanced societies. They hold their elections online, and in 2013, Estonia's capital city Tallinn made a public transport system free for locals. The sky did not fall in. Public transport in the city has improved, and the city's population has grown. New revenues have come from the increased population. Additional revenues come from tourists and non-residents who still buy tickets. But most importantly, Estonia's free transport network is changing habits. Use of public transport system has increased by 10%. Better still, the number of cars in the city has gone down by 10%. Luxembourg is set to introduce free public transport in 2020, and many other places have already introduced free public transport for certain groups or at certain times. 1/3 of all bus trips in London are free with concession travel passes, especially for senior citizens. Wales offers free travel over the weekend to boost tourism. My motion asks the Economy and Infrastructure Committee to take a bold step towards a cultural shift in the way we use public transport by looking at extending the free tram zone, opening up the entire network up for free travel for students and senior citizens, and exploring new technologies and pricing systems that would continue to grow Melbourne's reputation as one of the best cities in the world. I commend this motion to the House.